Most would have looked away, but not him. A 5-year-old boy found a German shepherd dragging himself through the mud legs, broken, hope faded. What happened next left everyone in tears. This is not just a story about pain, but about the quiet courage of a child who stayed, and a dog who hadn't given up on love. Rain fell gently over Pine Haven's valley, silver on the windows of a forgotten rescue center. Inside, the boy knelt beside a starving dog. Their eyes met, in silent understanding. Like, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from, because what happens next may stay in your heart forever. Late winter in Maple Hollow was a quiet kind of gray. Nestled in the ridges of Oregon's Cascade Mountains, the town pressed close to the pines, roofs hunched under days of drizzle. Everything felt softened, subdued. Rain clung to the air like breath. Along the outskirts, where the forest crept near the fences, the Parker house sat with its backyard dissolving into trees. Claire Parker stood at the kitchen sink, hands in dishwater, gazing out the window. In her mid-30s, she carried the kind of quiet resilience forged in emergency rooms and emptied bedrooms. Her chestnut hair was always tied back. The creases at the corners of her eyes spoke less of time, more of long nights, and the kind of grief that didn't leave marks unless you knew where to look. She had come here to start over with her son, Noah. After Ben died in that fire, just one wrong call in a collapsing building, everything in Bend felt too loud, too full of memories. Maple Hollow had no firehouse sirens, just trees, just quiet. The soft shuffle of feet broke through her thoughts. Noah appeared in the doorway, 5 years old, small even for his age, wrapped in a hoodie that hung past his knees. He had that look again, still, watchful, as though waiting for something the grown-ups couldn't hear. His thick dark hair flopped into his eyes, and his mouth was set in its usual half-thoughtful, half-dreaming line. He moved to the back door and pressed his nose to the glass. Claire watched him. She'd grown used to his silences, the way he'd drift off mid-play or stand whispering to sparrows on the porch. Ever since that camping trip, when he wandered too close to the river and nearly drowned, Noah had been different. At first she thought it was trauma, but then came the quiet conversations with birds, the way feral cats didn't flinch from his touch. The pediatrician had no answers, neither did Claire. Outside, the rain tapped a rhythm on the porch roof, and then, under it, something else. Noah stiffened. His palm flattened on the glass. A sound had come, faint and broken. Not the wind, not the rain. A cry, too soft for a scream, too real for the trees. Claire moved beside him. Probably just a raccoon. Noah shook his head. The sound came again. A low whimper, almost lost in the weather. And then he was pulling on his boots, moving with that quiet, stubborn certainty she had learned to fear. She caught the yellow slicker, shouting after him, but by the time she opened the door, he was already running across the yard. Rain splattered against his back. She ran after him, calling, slipping in the soft grass. He stopped at the tree line, just where the backyard met the forest. Claire slowed and saw why. There, crumpled beneath a curtain of wet pine boughs, lay a dog. A German shepherd, large and soaked to the skin, its hind legs twisted unnaturally beneath it. Its coat was a patchwork of mud and something darker, and it lay motionless except for the labored rise and fall of its chest. Its eyes, dull amber, half closed, tracked them, but didn't move otherwise. Claire instinctively put a hand on Noah's shoulder. Careful? But the boy stepped forward, slow, deliberate. He crouched beside the dog as though approaching a sleeping child. The shepherd didn't growl, didn't flinch, just watched. Noah whispered something Claire couldn't hear, then looked up. His name is Ranger. She scanned the dog's neck. There's no tag. He told me. Her stomach tightened. Noah? He didn't respond. His small fingers moved gently to the dog's ear. The shepherd exhaled, half a sigh, half surrender, and lowered its head to the ground. Rain dripped from its snout. Claire crouched now, too, on instinct. The dog didn't resist, didn't even flinch at her nearness. Its body trembled not from fear, but from pain, from exhaustion. "We need to get help," she muttered. Noah didn't answer. Claire studied the animal's face. There was something about those eyes, more than pain, more than fatigue. Something human, a look not of an injured beast, but of a soldier who had followed orders and been betrayed. It rattled her. Then Noah spoke again, voice low. They hurt him because he wouldn't fight. Claire blinked. What do you mean, fight? Her mind tripped over the word. Dogs don't... She stopped herself, but the thought remained. Fight what? Or who? Noah just kept stroking Ranger's fur. He didn't look at her. They tried to make him mean, but he wouldn't. Claire glanced back at the house. The lights glowed in the kitchen window, distant now. Thunder echoed, soft and slow. Then she saw it, clearly for the first time. The way the dog's body curled toward Noah, not away. The trust. The absence of fear. This wasn't a wild animal. This was something else. Something broken, yes, but not dangerous. Or maybe, only to the right people. She moved closer. The dog let her. She reached a hand to his shoulder, pressed gently. He was warm. He was shaking. We'll carry him, she said. Noah stood, boots sunk into the earth. He's very heavy. We'll try. They fashioned a sling from Claire's coat and a towel from the porch. Ranger didn't protest. When they lifted him, he whimpered, but didn't snap, didn't twist. Claire carried most of the weight, knees trembling. Noah walked beside, one hand always touching Ranger's side. Back on the porch, the light from the kitchen cast their shadows long and soft. The rain hadn't stopped, but it felt quieter now, like the forest was holding its breath. Before they opened the door, Claire looked at her son. His gaze was steady, the kind that made you believe things that didn't make sense. Are you all right? He nodded. He's scared, he said softly, almost to himself. But he knows we're not like them. Claire didn't ask who them was. She didn't ask how he knew. She opened the door and stepped aside to let the boy and the dog pass into the warmth of the house. Something in her told her nothing would be the same again. The morning came without sunlight. Clouds hung low over Maple Hollow, turning everything a shade of blue-gray. The road still shimmered from the night's rain, and pine needles clung stubbornly to the tires of Claire's car as she drove slowly toward the south end of town. The heater hissed faintly, fighting off the damp that had settled into their coats. In the back seat, Ranger lay curled on a blanket Claire had tucked into the seat, his breath shallow, eyes half closed. Beside him, Noah sat upright, one hand resting on the dog's shoulder. His expression was unreadable calm, almost too calm for a child. He hadn't said a word since waking, but Claire had noticed the way he'd hovered protectively as Ranger was lifted into the car, as if every jolt of the vehicle's motion might hurt the dog through him. The clinic stood tucked between a post office and a shuttered bakery on Elm Street, its front sign faded from years of sun and snow. Haley Morris, DVM. Claire pulled into the gravel lot, killed the engine, and turned. Ready? Noah nodded. Ranger didn't move. Inside, the building smelled faintly of antiseptic and cedar shavings. The lights were warm, humming overhead. Claire carried the dog herself, cradling him awkwardly with Noah holding the door. Ranger let out a low, involuntary grunt, but didn't resist. They stepped into the main examination room as a tall woman emerged from the back. Dr. Haley Morris looked to be in her mid-40s, lean and wiry, with the kind of quick, practiced movements that come from years of lifting sedated animals and managing emergencies alone. Her graying blonde hair was pulled into a braid that ran down the back of her faded navy scrubs. A pale scar traced the side of her left cheek, faint but unmistakable, earned, as Claire would later learn, from trying to break up a fight between two large dogs during her residency. "Claire Parker," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. Her voice was brisk but not unfriendly. "You're new in town, right? You called?" "Yes," Claire nodded. "This is Ranger. We found him last night behind our house. His legs are badly injured. I think they're broken." Haley's eyes moved to the dog, then to the boy standing silently behind Claire. "Let's take a look." The exam table creaked as Ranger was laid down. Claire stayed close, fingers lightly on his shoulder. Haley moved around them efficiently, palpating gently along the spine and ribs, then the hind legs. Ranger flinched once but didn't growl. "These breaks aren't fresh," she said at last. "Maybe 3 or 4 days old, multiple fractures, both hind limbs. There's bruising here, here, and here." Her fingers paused over the base of the neck. "Do you mind if I shave this patch?" Claire nodded. Haley took a pair of clippers from a nearby drawer. The whir of the machine filled the room briefly as she shaved a small area along Ranger's neck, her brow furrowed. Embedded under the skin was a hard lump. "There's something here," she said. "Not a standard microchip, though. Too large, too deep." She reached for a handheld scanner, waved it over the lump. Nothing. Noah had moved closer. He spoke quietly, eyes on the patch of skin. "They put it in him," he said, "so they can find him again if he runs." Claire looked down sharply. "Noah, how do you know that?" But the boy didn't answer. Haley studied the child a moment, then returned her attention to the dog. "I've seen maybe 2 cases like this in my whole career," she said. "Once in a retired police K9 that got stolen from out of state. The chip was military, and one other time." She trailed off. Claire prompted gently. "What happened the other time?" Haley's lips pressed together. "About a year ago, a local officer came around asking if I'd seen any dogs with irregular chips, not missing pets, dogs that had been altered. He wouldn't give details, just left his card. Name was Grant Myers. County detective. Never came back." Claire glanced at Noah, who stood tracing his finger along the edge of the exam table. "I think this might be connected," she said. Haley looked unconvinced. "This kind of thing doesn't happen in places like Maple Hollow." Claire hesitated, then leaned closer. "Noah, he says the dog talks to him. Not out loud, but somehow. That's how he knew about the chip." Haley's expression didn't change, but her hands slowed. She glanced at the boy. "Talks to him? Not words, feelings, pictures. He said the dog's name is Ranger before I said anything. He knew where to find him, in the forest." There was a long pause. Rain tapped lightly against the windows. Ranger let out a soft sigh, his breathing more labored now. Haley touched the dog's flank gently. "He's stable, but he needs surgery, a specialist for the legs at least. I can manage pain, clean the wounds, maybe even get that chip out if I'm careful." "Do whatever you can," Claire said. "Please." Noah had stepped forward again. He rested a hand on Ranger's head. His voice came out small but certain. "He doesn't want to go back. He just wants peace." Haley didn't speak. She simply nodded, turned to gather her instruments. Claire watched her work. The woman moved with skill, but there was a hesitation now, something in her face that hadn't been there before, something about Noah's words perhaps. Or maybe it was the dog's eyes still, unwavering, watching them both. For the next hour, the room filled with quiet sounds, the snip of scissors, the muted beep of a monitor Haley wheeled in, the rustle of gauze. Noah remained still, not speaking, not looking away. Claire alternated between watching him and the steady movement of Haley's hands. By the end of it, Ranger's legs were cleaned, splinted temporarily, his neck wrapped in gauze where the chip had been partially exposed. Haley didn't remove it yet, but she marked its position and made notes for a surgeon. "He needs rest," she said at last, wiping her forehead. "Keep him warm, no stairs. I'll come by tomorrow to check on him, but Claire, be cautious. If someone's looking for this dog, they may already know where he is." Claire didn't respond right away. Something tightened at the base of her neck. Through the clinic's front window, she glimpsed the fog still clinging to the treetops like a net. Beyond the parking lot, the shadows beneath the pines seemed darker than before, unmoving but too deep, too still. For a fleeting second, she had the strange sensation that someone was watching them, eyes hidden just beyond what the light could touch. She exhaled, steadying herself. On the ride home, Noah finally broke his silence. "He remembers the bad place," he murmured. "The cages, the lights, the smell of blood. He doesn't want to go back." Claire didn't speak. She just drove one hand white-knuckled on the wheel, the other brushing Noah's coat lightly as if to remind herself he was still there. Behind them, Ranger remained awake, quiet, and alert. His gaze flicking now and then to the back window, as if sensing that something was out there, moving just behind the mist. The rain had returned, soft at first, then heavier, as if the sky above Maple Hollow had forgotten how to be still. 3 days had passed since Claire brought Ranger home from Dr. Haley Morris's clinic. In that time, the German Shepherd remained quiet, stoic, and strangely alert, often gazing toward the windows as if waiting for something or someone. Claire had kept the curtains drawn and the porch lights off, a silent acknowledgement of the unease that had settled in her chest. The house smelled faintly of rosemary from the pot of stew simmering on the stove. Noah sat at the kitchen table, drawing on a scrap of cardboard with a green crayon. The shape was unmistakable. A red door, and beside it, 5 tiny ovals that looked like caged dogs. He didn't speak much, but he hummed to himself softly, a tune Claire didn't recognize, but that clearly belonged to some secret rhythm between him and the world he moved through. Then came the knock, 3 hard raps, not loud, but insistent. Claire froze. Ranger, who had been resting beside the fireplace, jerked upright. His ears perked. A low growl rumbled from his chest, the first sound he'd made in days that wasn't a whimper of pain. Through the peephole, Claire saw a man standing at the door, partially shielded beneath the hood of a long black raincoat. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a narrow face. His eyes, sharp and watchful, scanned the porch as if committing every detail to memory. In one hand, he held a laminated ID badge. In the other, a clipboard with a worn leather cover. Claire opened the door only a crack. "Can I help you?" The man offered a professional smile that never touched his eyes. "Ms. Parker, my name is Dalton Rains. I work with Monarch Enterprises. We specialize in the rehabilitation of rescued canines. We received a signal from a proprietary tracking device embedded in one of our registered dogs. I believe the animal may be in your care." Claire's grip on the door tightened. Her voice came out steady, but her heartbeat betrayed her. "I don't know what you're talking about." Dalton's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped slightly, almost courteous. "We're not law enforcement. Monarch operates under a private care and training contract. Many of our dogs are misunderstood, damaged, even dangerous. We only want to ensure their safety. And yours." Behind her, Ranger growled again, louder this time. Noah peeked from behind the hallway corner. When his eyes landed on the man, he went rigid. "No!" he suddenly cried. "Mom, it's him! It's the man from the bad place. He hurt Ranger. He hurt the girl." Dalton blinked, taken aback. Claire stepped in front of Noah instinctively. "I think you need to leave." Dalton adjusted his clipboard, but his demeanor remained polite. "If you reconsider, you can reach Monarch through the number on my card. I'll give you a few days. After that, we may need to involve the local authorities." He slipped a card through the door and walked away, his boots splashing in the puddles as the rain swallowed his figure into the fog. Claire shut the door and locked it. Her hands trembled. Later that night, while Noah slept and Ranger dozed uneasily beside the boy's bed, Claire sat at the kitchen table and flipped the card over. No website, no social media, just a name, a phone number, and a P.O. box in Idaho. She opened her laptop, the screen casting a faint glow into the room, and searched. Monarch Enterprises Dog Rescue. Nothing. Monarch Enterprises Oregon. No results that matched. She tried Dalton Rains, a few scattered results, none with photos. Frustrated, she tried a different approach. "Dog Fighting Rings Oregon," she typed. The screen populated with headlines she didn't want to read. Arrests, seizures, underground networks. Some were over a decade old. One link stood out. Lily Monroe missing. Since July, local girl believed to be connected to dog rescue raid. Claire clicked. A photo filled the screen, an official missing person alert. Lily Monroe, 10 years old, brown eyes, long blonde hair, and a braid. Last seen near the outskirts of Oak Ridge, wearing a red jacket and jeans. Believed to have been involved with rescuing animals from illegal kennels. Foul play suspected. Claire leaned back in her chair, stomach churning. From down the hallway, the soft creak of floorboards signaled Noah was up again. He wandered into the kitchen barefoot, hair tousled, eyes half-lidded. "She knew Ranger first," he said, without preamble. He used to sleep at her feet. She wasn't scared like the others. Claire knelt beside him. "The girl from the photo? Lily?" Noah nodded. "She tried to get the cages open, but the man caught her. He took her away before she could run." Claire didn't ask how he knew. By now she had stopped doubting the strange communion that existed between her son and the dog. The next morning, as the rain finally broke and the sun lit the dewy pines, Claire drove into town. She visited the small public library and asked the clerk, a stooped woman with graying hair named Margaret, for access to archived newspaper records. The name Monroe led her to a brief article about Lily's disappearance and an old photo of her standing beside a German shepherd in a rescue shelter newsletter. The dog had the same deep eyes as Ranger. Claire stared at the photo for a long time. It wasn't just a coincidence. Her gut told her this was the thread she had to follow. That evening, back home, Ranger rose shakily and walked to the living room window. He sat, eyes fixed on the trees beyond the yard. Noah joined him, leaning against his side. "Don't worry," the boy whispered. "We're not letting them take you back." Claire watched them from the kitchen, the wind curling at the corners of the house like fingers tapping to be let in. She reached for her phone, opened a blank note, and typed, "Lily Monroe, cages, monarch, red door, underground." She stared at the words. Somehow, they were all connected, and whatever Ranger had survived, it hadn't ended yet. The wind whispered through the pine trees, soft but restless, rattling the window panes of the Parker house. Inside, all was still, except for the slow, uneven rise and fall of Ranger's chest as he slept at the foot of Noah's bed. Claire, exhausted after a day of searching online records and making phone calls that led to nowhere, had finally drifted into a light, wary sleep in the next room. The rain had ceased, but the scent of wet earth lingered, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Noah stirred in his blankets, small fingers curling around the edge of his pillow. Then his eyes fluttered shut more tightly, and a soft whimper escaped his lips. Not of pain, but of something deeper, stranger. The dream came fast. It wasn't like his usual ones, with flying rabbits or swirling galaxies. This one arrived in pieces, images flooding in like postcards from someone else's life. At first, darkness, then brick. Endless rows of it, red and damp, forming the walls of a compound tucked deep in shadow. A heavy steel door swung open, its hinges screaming, and there below, a basement lit by cold, fluorescent lights. The smell struck first bleach and something coppery. Then came the sounds, muffled yelps, claws scraping against concrete, chains clinking softly like wind chimes in a graveyard. 5 cages lined the room, each barely large enough for the dogs within. One whimpered quietly, an old mutt with patchy fur and a raw wound on its paw. Another, brown-eyed and trembling, stood frozen in a corner, its ribs sharply outlined beneath matted fur. And there, in the farthest cage, sat Ranger. He looked younger, thinner. His body bore the same black and tan coat, but his eyes held a fierce alertness that had not yet dulled from pain. Across from him, just beyond the bars, was a girl, no more than 10, curled in a corner with a blanket pulled over her knees. Her blonde braid was loose, tangled from sleep or fear. In her arms, she cradled a tiny puppy, barely old enough to stand. She rocked it gently, her lips moving silently, singing something only she and the pup could hear. Lily. Ranger's eyes never left her. Even when a door above opened and heavy boots clattered down the stairs, he remained still watching. When a man in a dark coat shouted, when the girl was pulled up screaming and the puppy fell to the floor, Ranger barked once, low and defiant. Noah jerked awake. The bedroom was silent, dimly lit by the nightlight shaped like a moon. His chest heaved. Across from him, Ranger stood, not lying, not limping, just standing there, staring at him with those deep, old eyes. "I saw it," Noah whispered. "I saw her, and the cages, and the puppy. You didn't bark to escape. You barked to protect her." Ranger said nothing, of course, but he moved toward the bed, slowly, with care. When he placed his head beside Noah's hand, a tremor passed through both of them. Noah flinched. He felt it. The ache in Ranger's back legs, dull and ever-present. The tightness in his chest every time the wind howled too loud. The flashes of fear when certain smells, rubber gloves, rusted metal drifted through memory. It wasn't just thoughts anymore. It was feeling, deep, unspoken, undeniable. Down the hallway, Claire awoke with a jolt. She wasn't sure why. There had been no sound, just a heaviness pressing against her, like a presence in the air. She padded softly toward Noah's room and opened the door. What she saw stopped her in place. Noah sat up, his hand on Ranger's head. Both of them completely still, eyes locked. There was something unearthly in the room, not frightening, but solemn, like watching a truth unfold. "Noah," she said gently. He looked at her, face pale and serious. "He showed me where it happened, where they kept them." Claire crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. "A dream?" Noah shook his head. It was Ranger's memory. She should have been skeptical. A month ago, she would have been, but not now. Not after all she'd seen. Not after the man in the raincoat, the missing girl, and the way Ranger refused to sleep unless Noah was near. "What did you see?" she asked quietly. He told her about the brick walls, the basement, the cages, about Lily, about the puppy, and how Ranger didn't bark in fear, but in warning, in defiance. Claire rubbed her arms, chilled despite the warm air. "You felt it too?" Noah nodded. "When his legs hurt, my knees get heavy. When he remembers the dark, I get cold." Claire glanced at Ranger. He met her eyes for a long moment, unmoving. There was no doubt anymore about the dog, about her son, about the strange and invisible thread binding them. She stood and drew the curtains back a sliver. Outside, the woods swayed gently, peaceful on the surface. But something told her peace wouldn't last. That night, as she sat on the couch with her laptop once again, she didn't search for lost dogs or missing children. She searched property records, abandoned warehouses, old brick factories, places with basements, places no one visited anymore. She didn't know what she was hoping to find, but somewhere out there, beneath red brick and iron bolts, 5 cages might still remain. And a girl named Lily, if she were alive, might still be waiting for someone to remember she existed. The warehouse sat like a sleeping giant at the edge of town, its red door peeling with rust, its windows dark and thick with grime. A broken fence curved around the perimeter like a loose noose, and the faint hum of a generator pulsed from within, just loud enough to be noticed if you were quiet enough to listen. Claire parked her Subaru beneath a patch of fir trees across the road, killing the engine and lights in one motion. In the back seat, Noah shifted restlessly, his coat zipped to the chin, his breath fogging the cold window as he stared at the hulking silhouette of the building ahead. Beside him sat Haley Morris, her features sharp with purpose. The vet had traded her usual scrubs for a weatherproof jacket and boots. Her auburn hair, usually tucked under a messy bun, was braided down one side. Haley was practical, no nonsense, and had always kept a respectful distance from the townspeople, partly from the demands of her work, partly from a past she rarely spoke of. Years ago, she had lost her younger brother to a dog-fighting ring one that law enforcement never properly dismantled. Since then, she'd carried a quiet, burning resolve. They waited until the clouds cloaked the moon and the wind picked up, masking their approach. Claire took Noah's hand and whispered, "Stay close. Don't speak unless I say." Ranger was not with them. His legs were healing, but still fragile, and it was Noah himself who had insisted. He shouldn't go back there yet. He'll feel too much. They crossed the gravel silently, boots crunching only when the wind pushed. The warehouse loomed closer. As they approached the red door, Haley paused and knelt by the ground, pressing her fingers to a patch of disturbed earth. "Fresh tracks, not animal," she murmured. 2 sets, 1 adult, 1 lighter. Maybe a kid. Claire felt a flicker in her chest. "Lily?" Noah moved past them slightly, his head tilting. "She's afraid, but she's trying to be brave." Claire didn't ask how he knew. Not anymore. The side wall had a broken panel near the bottom, just wide enough to slide under. One by one, they crawled through, emerging into a long hallway lined with crates and tarps. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and something fouler beneath, like old sweat and metal. A low growl echoed through the corridor. Haley raised a hand, motioning them to freeze. A second later, the sound faded. From a nearby room came a mechanical click, a camera shifting its position. Claire whispered, "Security?" Haley nodded. Motion-based, probably rigged to notify someone. They crept deeper, passing stacked bags of dog food and crates labeled with veterinary supply brands. It looked almost normal, at a glance like a warehouse for shelter donations. But the further they moved, the stranger it became. Metal doors lined the corridor. Some had scratched paint, others bore faint streaks like dried fluids. From behind one came the muffled sound of whimpering. Claire's heart pounded. They reached a stairwell at the back, metal, rusted, leading down. "It's here," Noah said. "She's down there." Claire hesitated, placing a hand on the railing. Before she could step forward, a heavy voice rang out behind them. "Going somewhere?" They turned as one. Dalton stood at the hallway entrance, tall and solid in his black coat. His face was calm, but his eyes glinted with something cruel. One hand rested on a holstered taser. Claire stepped in front of Noah. You lied. You're not rescuing anyone. I told you I worked for Monarch. I didn't say we were saints, he said, voice flat. The facility below is legally registered as a training and rehabilitation space. No one forced you to come here. But you forced her, Noah said quietly, stepping past his mother. You took Lily. You took Ranger. You made them fight. Dalton's smile faded. That girl was a problem, and that dog, he was designed for obedience, not sentiment. A sharp, commanding voice cut through the air. Hands where I can see them, Dalton. Step back from the boy. From the shadows behind the supply crates emerged a man in plain clothes, gun drawn and badge gleaming. He looked to be in his mid-40s, square-jawed with flecks of gray at the temples, and wore the air of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. Grant Myers, Klamath County Sheriff's Office, he said, eyes never leaving Dalton. I've been tracking Monarch Enterprises for over 6 months. Dalton stiffened but didn't move. Myers continued, voice steady. You've tampered with records, hidden minors, and violated animal welfare laws. I have a signed warrant and live surveillance. There's a unit waiting 2 blocks down. Haley exhaled sharply, lowering the wrench she'd been holding behind her back. Myers glanced at Claire, then at Noah, his tone shifting slightly. I knew Lily, not well, but enough. She tried to warn me once, said she could understand the dogs, really understand them. I believed her, but no one else did. We lost track of her after that. Claire's voice was tight. Do you know if she's alive? Myers hesitated. I don't. But I know someone is still using this facility at night. And whoever it is, they're scared. There's been movement, small, fast, like a child avoiding cameras. Noah whispered. She's waiting. She still believes someone's coming. Myers turned to Dalton, who had gone very still. Get on your knees. Now. Dalton hesitated, then slowly complied as backup footsteps echoed from the hallway. Claire knelt beside Noah, brushing his hair back. We're close. Noah looked down the stairwell again. She's under there, and she's not alone. The morning sun spilled across the fields of Pine Haven like a quiet blessing. What had once been a neglected stretch of farmland just outside Klamath Falls now bloomed with the early colors of spring lavender crocuses poking through thawed soil, tulips nodding toward the breeze, and a gravel path winding toward a new building clad in pale cedar, its windows wide open to let the light in. Claire adjusted the sign out front. The words Pine Haven, Canine Recovery and Sanctuary shimmered in hand-painted green, flanked by 2 paw prints. She stepped back, brushing dirt off her jeans, and took a breath. It smelled like new beginnings. Behind her, a truck from the sheriff's department eased into the lot. Haley climbed down from the passenger side, her braid tucked into a ball cap today, a clipboard in hand. Her posture remained brisk, but there was a looseness in her shoulders that hadn't been there months ago. 5 dogs stepped out of the transport van, each moving hesitantly. A chocolate lab with a twisted paw, a brindled mutt with half an ear, a golden retriever with patches of fur missing, and 2 German shepherds, one older with a clouded eye, the other smaller and constantly glancing over his shoulder. Noah stood by the kennel gate, now 11, his hair longer, more wind-tangled. He didn't speak as they approached. He just knelt, opening the gate with a gentle gesture. Come on, he whispered. You're safe now? And somehow they understood. Each dog, in their own time, stepped onto the grass. The golden retriever whimpered and pressed his body low. The mutt circled once and lay down. The smaller shepherd looked toward the big figure by the fence ranger, then slowly followed. Ranger had grown stronger. His limp was faint now, just enough to remind you he'd once been broken. He had gained weight, his fur was thick again, and his gaze held a quiet watchfulness. He didn't bark or move as the newcomers arrived. He simply stood, tail low, as if passing silent approval. Noah walked over to him and pressed his forehead to the dogs. They don't know yet, he murmured, but you'll help me show them. Over the last few months, Noah had become something of a mystery to the local rescue volunteers. Adults said he was unusually calm around the animals. Other kids at school said he could talk to dogs. But those who spent time at Pine Haven began to believe he could do more than talk. He could feel with them. It had started when Noah began sitting near the kennels during the renovations. If a dog refused food, Noah would sit quietly, sometimes humming, and within an hour the food would be gone. When one of the shepherds had a night terror, it was Noah's voice that soothed it. He never explained. He didn't have to. Claire watched her son from the doorway. A breeze lifted her hair, and she turned toward Haley, who had just finished signing the final intake form. "Do you think it's possible," Claire asked, "that he really feels what they feel?" Haley looked at the boy and then at Ranger, who stood beside him like a sentinel. "I think whatever it is," she said, "it's helping." Lily Monroe walked with a slight limp now. Her frame was still thin, her cheeks sunken from long months of silence, but color had returned to her face. She was 12 and had the eyes of someone much older. When Myers and his team had found her in that underground chamber, barely conscious, hidden in a closet behind stacks of broken kennels, she'd clutched a worn plush dog in her arms and asked for Ranger before she even asked where she was. Now, she sat beneath the dogwood tree at the back of the sanctuary, Ranger's head resting on her lap. Her fingers moved through his fur rhythmically. "She remembers everything," Claire had told Haley. "But she talks about it only when she chooses." It was enough. Claire had pulled Myers aside that morning, away from the crowd, her fingers clutching a coffee cup gone cold. "She's healing," Claire said quietly. "But she hasn't told me much about what happened down there." Myers nodded, his face shadowed under his wide-brimmed hat. "She might not, for a long time. But I remember what she said that night." He paused, eyes far away. "She said she heard someone calling her name. That's when she crawled out from behind the broken shelves. She thought it was Noah's voice, but it was me. We found her curled up in the dark, still whispering to the puppy she lost long ago." Claire didn't answer right away, but her hand reached for her pendant, a small bronze leaf Noah had given her the day they opened the sanctuary. Something about it steadied her. In the cleanup after Monarch's fall, the truth began to emerge piece by piece. Myers had helped secure the facility for federal investigation. Claire, meanwhile, had gone back into the basement briefly before demolition. She had found a room with cement walls and clinical lighting. In the center stood a board marked Combat Behavior Metrics. Another wall held camera feeds labeled with tags like pain-induced aggression and bond suppression. She had taken photos, she had cried, and she hadn't shown them to Noah. He had his own way of knowing. The day of the Pine Haven opening ceremony was bright and cool. Volunteers arrived with ribbon and lemonade stands. Local reporters set up their tripods, and townspeople gathered around the sanctuary gate. Noah didn't like the noise much. He lingered near the back fence, away from the crowd. Ranger stayed by his side, his ears flicking at the sound of voices. The mayor gave a short speech. Haley was thanked. Claire nodded through questions. Someone asked about therapy dog programs. Another asked about adopting. But it was when Claire invited Noah to say something that the crowd stilled. He stepped forward, hesitant at first. Then he knelt by Ranger and whispered, voice low, but carried by the microphone clipped to his collar. "We don't have to fight to survive anymore," he said. "We get to live now, to feel safe, to love." It wasn't grand, but it was enough. Sometimes the smallest hearts carry the greatest miracles. Noah and Ranger reminded us that love, even in silence, can heal what the world has broken. In every muddy path, in every frightened soul, God places a light, a chance to choose kindness. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and may God bless you and everyone you love. Type Amen below if you believe every soul deserves a second chance.